In a few weeks, the Ex Machina Games will be conducting a Kickstarter campaign to support our next Amethyst project. Although many watching this know of what I speak, others are probably thinking, what the hell is Amethyst? To know that, we need to set the Wayback Machine to the mid-90s, when I developed a story about dragons in a post-apocalyptic setting. Back then, Amethyst only referred to a dragon living within a city, not a godlike entity that created every element of fantasy. It was more apocalyptic than magical, and I shelved the project after the film Reign of Fire was released. In 2001, I dusted off that project to run a traditional D&D game. The first iteration still had drow and demons and gold dragons. Disruption wasn't implemented for nearly 6 months. The timeline was retconned more times than I'd like to count. In 2007, friends and I developed Amethyst as a fully fleshed out published book. There were hurdles and issues, which I'm sure I will discuss in another video for those looking for advice in self-publishing. But the end result was the 2008 3.5 edition, released 2 months before the distribution of 4th edition D&D. Awkward. In June of that year, we made the commitment to adapt Amethyst to 4th edition and signed onto the GSL before anyone else had. This got the attention of Goodman Games, which put up the capital to have Amethyst distributed across the world. Amethyst Foundations was released in 2010, but soon after, Goodman dropped 4th from its lineup, preferring to endorse their own game line, Dungeon Crawl Classics. Well, so we are still retaining the IP. Amethyst continued through my private label, Deus Ex Machina, and we saw the release of Amethyst Evolution and Amethyst Renaissance, the latter of which was an adaptation to Pathfinder. Although we still have plans to adapt it for a fourth system, the priority is for a setting expansion for rules we've already published for, thus the Kickstarter. But what makes it so special? Amethyst presents itself as a real setting with a fantasy world forced upon it. It's as much a satire of the genre as well as a loving tribute to it, asking why we as consumers purchase and play role-playing games, both digital and tabletop, creating roles and burying ourselves in virtual lives, sometimes to the ignorance of the real world around us. I actually know people that would sacrifice their modern conveniences in order to live in a world populated with dragons and magic. But how many would actually survive it? Like people working in front of computers who isolate themselves from the outside world, now whole societies cloister themselves around a hostile magical landscape. I presented what I perceived as real-world reactions to that which so many seem to want to have in their lives, magic and fantasy. I mean, we got Mortal Instruments, Harry Potter, Narnia, Percy Jackson. All of these involve normal people in the real world being exposed to the unbelievable, and honestly responding to it rather well. But even more than that, Amethyst also sets in opposition technology and fantasy. We like to romanticize fantasy, but how many of us would truly give up the internet, cellular phones, and refrigerators for it? If in order to truly live in a world of fantasy, you'd be forced to sacrifice all your modern conveniences, who in the right mind would do it? And then let's postulate that said fantasy was forcing its way upon the earth. Which side would you actually choose? And still, this is not every facet of Amethyst's setting. The world of magic is also divided into polar conflicts of order versus chaos, but where order is considered negative, corrupt, even evil, and that chaos assumes a positive role, which players ultimately side with. That chaos is what creates life, what triggered the very creation of the universe, and uniformity is a state where life, and to its extent consciousness, never comes into being. Or you can shoot dragons in the face with laser guns. In the end, the choice is yours. The title comes from the MacGuffin, the plot device, which places our heroes on their quest. But here, the fragment of a dragon god's heart, when brought together, could enable one the power to either shutter the entire world of magic, or guarantee its perseverance upon the world. But is there a balance? Coexistence of what is real and what is not? About fantasy, science, faith, and logic? Can our desire to dream still persist in a universe with undeniable rules? Perhaps. Only time will tell.